Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video. And this time we're discussing Testalonga's Follow Your Dream Carignan 2021. If you want to skip past the ramble and just get straight to the tasting notes, click on chapter 4 as marked out in the timeline at the bottom of this video window. Now, every vintage, the wine fraternity waits eagerly for the new release of winemaker Craig Hawkins' Testalonga wines. And also to hear about this crazy progress he's making in the badlands of the Swartland on a farm called Banditskloof. We want to know, what grapes has he planted? Which vines is he bringing to maturity? What's next for our intrepid explorer? And while we may all be united in our love for Craig Hawkins and Testalonga, we each have very different reasons for that love. And in fact, if we're honest, many of them have nothing to do with the wine at all. I mean, for starters, they're the labels, which are a gift in themselves. I mean, beyond just using neon colors, his photography and his aesthetic is a fascinating showcase of the power of a brand and the ability to stand out in a retail environment. Some people love him for their ability not to drink his wines, but to give them away as gifts, because really you just feel more street for giving away a bottle of wine that has graffiti on the label. Beyond that, he's also big in Japan. And just knowing that there's a Swartland farmer who can be considered cool in Kyoto makes you a better person every time you hand over one of those bottles. Some might argue just having a bottle of wine in your wine rack is street credit enough, because they're so darn hard to get a hold of here in South Africa. Almost all of them are exported. And then, of course, there are the natural wine acolytes who love Craig for the fact that he holds fairly firmly to a natural winemaking philosophy and tries to use sulfur as little as possible. He works with organic fruit, even though not all of it is circumcised. I mean, really, by the time you're done thinking about Craig and his natural winemaking philosophy, you almost feel like it's healthy for you to get hammered on his Harslevelu. And speaking of Harslevelu, there are people who love him for the fact that he works with some really obscure cultivars. Now, sure, he has really made a name for himself using the more commonplace Chenin Blanc. In fact, he has about 5 renditions. But he also works with Mourvèdre and Tinta Amarella and Trincadeira and Carignan and Harslevelu. And those grapes alone are enough to earn him a place of love and respect in the heart of every grape hunter forever. And finally, if those aren't all reasons enough to love him, there are people like myself who love him most for his ability to reinvent a cultivar, usually through very, very simple winemaking. Now, as we've said before, he has made his name through Chenin Blanc, but he's got 5 Chenin Blancs, and they are all distinctly different to one another. And so when he decides to work with a cultivar like Carignan, you can be certain that what you're not going to get is just another safe expression of the grape. Now, there's nothing wrong with safe. In the history of the HanDrinksSolo Wine Club, we have featured a number of really drinkable Carignans from places like the Voorpaardenberg, or from the Banditskloof, or from Riebeck's Castile. But by and large, Carignan can be pedestrian. You'll get lovely red fruit elements and some cherries and some cranberry, maybe some red plum if it's a slightly riper expression. And if you're lucky, you'll get cinnamon and a hint of smoked meat, and it's going to be balanced and easy drinking. The acidity is never going to be crazy, and the aromas are unlikely to be outlandish. Which is perhaps why, when you crack this guy, the experience is so electric. The nose is a fascinating explosion of raspberries and blood orange and sour cherry, even some cinnamon, and then there are rose petals and potting soil. It's truly dynamic. And sure, those elements don't all pop out immediately, but that's part of the joy. The wine just keeps unfolding, and the aromas alone will keep you entertained all evening. On the palate, sure, the tannins are grippy and the acid is bright, and that shouldn't be a surprise. When you look at the alcohol on the bottle, it's 12%, and the residual sugar is just over 1 gram, which means the grapes were picked when they didn't have that much sugar in them. So you would expect big aromatics and you'd expect bright acidity. But what is such an amazing, pleasant surprise is how well formed the fruit is. You've got a sweet and sour raspberry sherbet going on that is just in perfect balance. And yeah, the cherry presents itself as sour cherry, but underneath that you've got sweeter candy elements. And as I mentioned earlier, that cinnamon spice that just weaves its way through on the palate. And then if that's not enough, there's the blood orange citrus element that I spoke about earlier, finished off with the rather interesting kind of fennel and chicory stem element, which is brought about by the fact that this wine is 100% fermented as whole bunches. Of course, the trouble is that when you look at the color of the wine and see it to be really light, and then you smell it and the nose is so explosive and aromatic, you immediately feel like this is the sort of wine that you should be quaffing by the glass next to the pool. But I fear that drinking it this way will do a disservice to both the wine and to the drinker. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit of time with this guy. Just because he's neon pink doesn't mean you shouldn't take him seriously. Now, when I first started featuring Testalonga skin contact Chenin Blancs in the HanDrinksSolo wine club, I used to talk about these skin contact wines as white wines made with a red wine ethos. So perhaps it's only fitting that my parting thought on this Carignan is that it appears to be a red wine that is channeling the spirit of an aromatic white wine, which I think is a fascinating outcome. So once you've cracked it, hop onto the website and leave a few thoughts of your own. I'd love to hear what you think of it, and I will answer any questions that you might have. Finally, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo wine channel in order to stay up to date with emerging South African winemakers, exciting new regions, unusual cultivars, and all-round wine cellar geekery.